Hey everybody, it's Jesse, and today I'm going to teach you a little bit about TypeScript. Okay, so this is going to be a very basic TypeScript tutorial. I don't really consider myself an expert at TypeScript, but I've been using it now mainly with React and React Native for let's say, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, something like that. Not really sure, but I've been using it for a while. So I just want to go over some basic types and and how you might use it. I'm not really going to go into how you would set it up for your particular project. That kind of depends on what type of build you're using. For this, I just opened up a blank file in Visual Studio Code, and I set my type here to TypeScript. My file type to TypeScript, and I believe I have maybe a TypeScript plugin, although I think VS Code is maybe comes with TypeScript. But whatever your editor is, maybe double check to make sure it can handle TypeScript before you start using it. But just want to start out with some basic types, and maybe I should start out with why you would even want to use TypeScript. So JavaScript is not a typed language, right? What I mean by that is, like, I can just say const here and declare whatever I want. So a number, a string, an array, right? This is an array with objects inside of it. These are functions, right? All of these are declared using the same thing, right? In a strongly typed language, I couldn't just do that. I would have to declare an int, maybe for a number, and depending on what kind of number I wanted, it might have to be something different. It would be different if I wanted to include decimals. If it's a large number, maybe I'd have to declare a double, right? Or there's different types of ints, like an int 8, an int 16, an int 32. You'd have to declare if you were going to use a string. You would have to declare if you're going to use an array. So when you first declare that variable and define it, you have to say what the type is. So it's kind of nice in JavaScript that you don't have to do that, but it also leads to potentially some bugs that could be avoided and are avoided in more strongly typed languages, right? So TypeScript can help you catch what would possibly become a bug way faster in your program. It also helps you, when you're coding, to know exactly what you need to pass into a function, what type of object it's going to take, right? For instance, in this function here, we're passing in name and age. Is the age supposed to be a number, or is it supposed to be a string, right? It probably won't make a difference the way we're using it, but if I were maybe doing some math inside this function, then that might make a big difference as to whether I'm passing this as a number or a string. Just with normal JavaScript, I would have no idea unless I actually went into this function and tried to understand, what the function was doing, right? So with TypeScript, it would let me know immediately if I tried to pass the wrong type into this function. Before I even hit save or anything, it would probably give me a little red underline or something like that telling me, hey, you passed a string, but it's supposed to be a number, right? So it may not seem like a big deal, and I didn't think it was a big deal for a long time, and I held off on using TypeScript, but now that I've been using it for a while, it definitely is a big deal, and it helps me to program a lot more quickly. Even though it took me extra time and extra work to get it set up and to learn it, now that I know at least a little bit of it, it's definitely helping me. So let's go through and add some types in here. It's actually not too difficult. There's not a whole lot of extra syntax to learn. Let's take this first one. I made it easy and I named it number, right? And I said it's a number. But if we wanted to be sure, we'd just give a little colon here and we'd say number, right? And that's a number. Sometimes if the type is very obvious, TypeScript will even tell you like, hey, you don't really need to give it a type. But I made these obvious for the purposes of this video, and actually it's it's letting me do this. Usually it does tell me like you don't really need to type here. So we just said this is a number here, and so now, right, we know, hey, this is a number. And anytime we would try to use this later on, or if we tried to change, like let's try to change the value here. Let's say, oops, num equals, whoops, actually I can't because it's a const. Let's change it to let. So num equals, actually the empty string should probably tell us. This string is not assignable to type number. So if we try to do a string, nope, not assignable, right? Because that's supposed to be a number. Now if we go in here and put the number 12, hey, it works, right? Because it's supposed to be a number. So that's what's called like type safety, right? So we know this is always supposed to be a number. I mean, it's easy to see here, but let's say we had a large program where, you know, we define this in one place and then somewhere entirely, you know, in a different place, you know, somebody else is working on the code and they decide to add a string here, an array or an object or something. And if they did that, it would mess things up pretty bad. Maybe not in their part of the code, so they might not see it immediately, but it would mess up other parts of the code. Well, now you don't have to worry about that, right? Because you've just defined like, hey, this is always supposed to be a number, right? The same thing if we wanted to do, you know, username is usually a string, so we could just say, hey, it's a string, and we get that same type safety, right? Now, if we wanted to have an array, arrays are a little bit different because not only would we want to say it's an array, but we also want to say that it is an array of strings. Notice we have all strings in here, and I want to keep it all strings. All right, let's say that for whatever reason, the way I want to use this string in my program, this array in my program, it has to be strings, right? That's fine. In TypeScript, we can handle that. So there's two ways we could do this. There's a regular way and a shorthand way. I'll show you the regular way first. We could say array, oops, and then we could say it's an array of strings. So we could do array string. Okay? There's a shorthand way to do this, which could potentially be a little bit confusing. Like array string is very obvious, right? Even if you didn't know TypeScript, you could probably tell like, all right, that's an array string. Especially if you've used a strongly typed language before, you'd be able to tell what was going on. But if we wanted to save a few characters, we could just say string and then put little array brackets, and that would still say an array of strings. And we could see, right, this is animals is supposed to be an array of strings. So that's how we handle arrays. Let's look at functions. So I think this really starts to help when we talk about functions. So we have this function, and this is an addition function, and so we want to make sure that these are numbers. Now I realize that JavaScript will coerce strings into being numbers if we want to do addition and things on them, but we don't want to rely on that because there's some weird things that can happen if we try to rely on that. So we want to make sure that these are numbers. So we can go right inside here where we pass in our arguments, and we can say number and number, right? Now, if I try to call this function with, it's going to tell me to do numbers, but if I try to call it with a string, let's say a string and a number, well, it's giving me this right here. It says argument of type sad is not assignable to parameter of type number, right? I didn't really mean to type sad. I just hit some numbers. It came out as a word. So it's letting us know that we need to pass in a number, right? Now, what we can also do here is we can say what type is going to be returned from this function. So this is an arrow function, so it's automatically returning the result here. And the result of the addition of two numbers is also going to be a number, right? So it's going to return a number. So if we go over this, it's going to say, right, we are adding num1, or we're taking the arguments num1 and num2, which are both numbers, and the return value of this is going to be a number, right? So we get a lot of good information in tooltips to let us know what exactly to expect in terms of inputs and output. Okay? And just in case we don't read that, or if we ignore that, try to pass in something different, we also get the little squiggly red line letting us know, hey, this is not the right type. Okay, so very, very useful. We'll do one more function just to kind of get a handle for it. So let's say string here, and then in this case, let's see what happens when we do. Let's do number for age. Okay, cool, and it's gonna let us do that. It's going to let us throw in a number and turn that into a string, and then the result is going to be string. Okay, so now if we hover over this, our function name is intro, and we're going to pass in a name that's a string, we're going to pass in age that's a number, and then we're going to get a return value of a string. Okay, so pretty straightforward. I'm going to show you one more thing. That'll be it's slightly more advanced than just the beginning types, but I think it's very useful. All right, so what if you have something like this? So posts is an array of objects, right? And then within that object, we have ID, which is a number, and we have content, which is a string. So how would we do that? Right, so we have a few options here, right? So let's first see. We could do our array, right? Array, and you would think maybe we could just say object, right? But that's not really what we want to do here, right? It's if you hover over this is like it's not giving us a red line, but that's not exactly what we want to put here, right? And it doesn't really tell us anything about. I mean, yes, we want objects in here, but what about the stuff inside the objects, right? It's still, not really providing us with what we want. So I guess we could do inside of here, we could say we have an ID number, and we could say content of string. And then if we hover over this, we can see like, okay, cool, that works. Right. There's another way we could do this, right? What if we had an instance where I wanted to let's say that I had a function that was like, let's say display post, and I wanted to pass it a post, and then let's say we were gonna do some stuff with the post. I don't know what kind of stuff we're gonna do, but let's just say we're gonna post.content. Let's say we're gonna console log the post.content just for now, right? The post, we could go ahead and define the post just like we did here, which would be okay since it's not that much. But imagine if this object was much bigger, right? It would be a situation where we definitely not want to keep doing this everywhere that we use that, right? So if we could save this type to a variable or something like that, then we could reuse it very easily. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. And there's two ways we could do that. So we could say that we could say type, and let's get this type post, I'm just going to make this capital post just to give it, to differentiate it a little bit. And you can see even like my my editor is already making this a different color. So let's say type post, and then let's copy and paste this. Let's get this in here. Oops, we need an equal sign here. So we could say type post equals ID num, right, and content. Now we could say post. And so post, so now post contains, it's an array of posts. And when we look at what a post is, it's an ID and number. So now down here, right, if we wanted to say this accepts a post, we could use our custom type, and now we know, hey, this is what we have. And if I tried to console log, let's say post.data, it's going to say, hey, listen, data does not exist on type post, right? Because it knows exactly what is supposed to be a part of this post object and what the types are. So now we know, and we get some auto completion. So if I go post dot, now I know I have content and ID available to me. This is very helpful when you have objects that you're passing around to different parts of your application, and you don't have to go look up exactly what that object is supposed to have in it. So again, this object only has two keys in it, right? But if you had a very large object, this would be super helpful. It is actually very helpful to get that autocomplete and to know what's there on that object. I like to do, like if I'm making API calls, I like to make types for the API response so that I know exactly what I'm getting, and then wherever I use that response from that API, I don't have to go back to the API documentation to see what I should be getting, because I've already have that defined as a type, and I get that nice autocomplete. So that saves a lot of time. Now I did say there's another way to do this. So let's say interface, and let's just say, I'm going to name it post interface. Actually, let's do this. Let's say post. No, interface makes more sense. I just don't want to be confusing here. So you don't have to name it interface. You can name it whatever you want. But what I could do here is I could do exactly the same thing. And you could make an interface as well. To be 100% honest, like usually I don't know for sure what the difference between a type and an interface is, other than like the slight syntax difference. But most of the time, if I'm doing like, if it's an API call and it's a large object that's coming back, I use an interface. If it's something small or like if there's a sub object on the interface, I use a type. Okay. So if anybody knows like exactly what the difference is in using these, please put it in the comments or let me know. But to me, at least that seems just like the convention that interfaces tend to be bigger than types. But again, I'm not 100% sure on that. So you can pretty much use these interchangeably. Okay. There's one more thing I want to show you. Let's add something onto. Actually, let's break this out and say, like, you don't have to have a semicolon, so you can actually define in your configuration file what you want the delimiter to be. So you'll see variations on this: semicolons at the end, no semicolons at the end, whatever you really want to do. TypeScript is very configurable. But I'm going to show you one more thing you can do with TypeScript that's kind of nice. We could say, let's say post type, and what we're going to do is we're going to give this several options for post type. So it's going to be maybe I don't know, let's say blog could be a post type. Let's say event can be a post type, and then maybe announcement. All right, so now we have this post type on here. So let's go ahead and put, let's say that we're passing in the post interface, and let's go in here and see now we have post type. Whoops. So we have that option. Actually, this is what I meant to do. Now we can come in here and say, how did I want to do this? Let me make a, let's see if this will work. So let's say post dot post type, and we're going to say equals, and then now it gives me a list of what I just put in here. So you can see announcement, event, and blog are here. So I can see now that these are the only things that are allowed. So if I wanted to put in something else, it's going to tell me. It's going to say ASDF is not assignable to type blog, event, announcement, right? So I've made like a very custom type here, right? So the post interface is an object that only has these keys that can be these values, and the post type can only be a string of one of 3 values, right? So I've limited it even more. So this is very useful. You know, if you want to use, there's a lot of places in applications that I've built where I want to display a thing on a page or something like that, and each thing has its own name, which is a string, and anybody who's working on that application then would automatically be able to see these are the values that are allowable. You know, if whatever you're coding requires, if it's a new thing that requires a new value, then you need to go in and update your interface. Okay, and then it'll be added to the list. All right, but I can immediately see what's going to be there. So if I say, you know, the post type here is announcement, then great, that's allowed. So hopefully you get an idea of how to use TypeScript and the benefits of TypeScript. Okay, this is just kind of really, I think, the basics of TypeScript. There's a lot more that you can use. I'll put a link in the description to like the documentation, the official documentation for TypeScript. And if you happen to be using TypeScript with something else like React or Redux, there's kind of even more that you can get into. So a package like React is going to come with extra types that are beyond just the basic types that come with TypeScript. And Redux is the same way. It comes with extra types that have been defined. And if you start using TypeScript, you'll find that a lot of the libraries that you're already using have these extra types that they've defined in case you want to use TypeScripts with their libraries. And you'll be able to incorporate that in. So these will give you like the basics to start adding TypeScript into your project. And if you have an existing project, right, you don't have to switch everything over at once. You can just kind of one at a time switch your files over to TypeScript. If you have a new file, you can certainly, or for a new project, you can start out with TypeScript and go like 100% TypeScript right off the bat. But this should give you a nice like basis to go on, and then, you know, little by little as you code, you'll come across situations where these basics just won't give you exactly what you need, and then you can go to the documentation, you know, do a Google search, check Stack Overflow, and you should be able to find how to handle these other types. That's been my experience. It seems like, you know, I don't know about every day, but very frequently I'll come across a situation where I'll think, I don't know exactly how to do do this in TypeScript. I don't know what type to give this. And if I have time, occasionally I have to just get the thing done, and so I just don't put a type on it. But ideally, when I have time, I look it up and I figure out exactly how to do it. So it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you can give it a type that'll be useful in your situation, that's really the goal. If you find that TypeScript is just taking a lot of time and it's not providing much usefulness, then maybe you don't need it for your project. But I would say, give it a couple months of using it, daily, before you really try to evaluate, because it won't be that helpful until you get at least most of your project with TypeScript in use in the correct way. Then you'll really start to see the benefits of it. So I hope this is helpful. And let me know in the comments if you like TypeScript, if you're gonna try it, if you have any tricks or tips with types that you found useful. Like I said, I use it mainly with React. Use it with Redux. It'd be cool to hear what you all use it with. And and if you like this video and you want more TypeScript stuff, let me know. If you have some other topics that you really like me to cover, I'd be more than happy to do it. My specialty right now is kind of, React Native. So anything in that area, I'd be happy to do a video on. Also, my social media info is going to be in the description as well. If you'd rather ask me a question on, one of my social media channels, feel free to do that. If you want to see me doing some live coding, you can check me out on the Free Code Camp YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of live coding recently with React Native, and I'm doing that in TypeScript as well, so you can see some TypeScript in action there. And until next time, have a great day, and good luck with TypeScript.